I'm Zed. You might have watched this channel before. If you have, I have done a lot of disjointed content in the past, and to be honest, it hasn't really worked out for me. I'll put them up on screen, but you can see that I have not exactly done the best when it comes to YouTube content. And I think that's okay. You know, I'm not here to be salty about that. Instead, what I am here to do is to kind of announce a little bit that I am kind of going towards a different avenue. I've been doing a lot of game development recently, and this is a game that I released myself. You can go and play it right now. I'll link in a description on itch.io. It is freely available to play. But now that I've completed that game, and it's my first game, I wanted to tackle something a little bit more ambitious. So, I've joined a game jam that is going. It is 10 days in total, so I will have 10 days to make this game. Now, it's not easy, but I'm trying to aim for an easier game to make. I am making a game called Photos of the Fathomless. I've set up a little Kanban board here, and these vlogs will go over the development cycle of the game. Right now, we gotta work on the needs. And of course, this list probably isn't even complete. I probably still need to add more stuff to this list. But this is what I got so far, and it's what I'm going to be working with. And we're going to start first with the player. Because the player character in this game is deep underwater, as the theme of the game jam is horror underwater. And there are secret themes that have yet to be announced, but I'm in the planning phase. So once those get announced, I can add them to this plan. So, in progress, we're going to write player. Because the player needs to feel slightly sluggish and a little weighty, but also a little floaty. If I add a jump to the game, they need to kind of glide back down to the surface, not so much immediately plop back down like in my other game. Once that's done, so, not yet, once this is done, then we can work on the world and the atmosphere and keep going down this list of needs. But until this is done, we're not doing anything else. So we can just cross this off of here. There will be times where we will be working and two things will be in progress at the same time, or maybe even 3 or 4. But as a general rule of thumb, when I'm first starting, player's the first thing that needs to be done. So I will take us over to the footage of me in a few days when I start working on the player. Since the game jam hasn't started yet, I will be starting once the game jam starts.
Now, to achieve this, what I've done is I've actually used a plugin called TerraBrush. It's very, very effective at what it does, and it's going to help out a lot in the map making process because it can generate some very natural looking terrain by allowing us to manipulate it Sims style with the brushes. Well, this isn't anything to look at just yet. This is a good start for us to work with on putting our player into the game. So, next up was, of course, the player controller, as I mentioned. So, what we needed to do was first set up a collision shape for the player, which was super easy. And then, of course, we were going to go ahead and give it a mesh and some basic functionality. What you don't see here is me making the player controller script, which doesn't take very long. It's a pretty easy script to make. I just added a little less speed to it than I normally would, and overall, very simple, easy construction to get a basic player character controller working. And here we have the first 2 playtests, so these went pretty well. You can see the character moving across the screen there, and then I went ahead and stitched the camera to the player so that it could actually be viewable in first person. Of course, we still need to capture the mouse, and we need to make the camera able to rotate, but for the first attempt, pretty good. This one's a little embarrassing, all things admitted. But this is me fumbling around with the code for about a minute and a half, trying to figure out why I couldn't get the mouse to capture. Eventually, I got it working. This is me just messing around with the sensitivity to try and figure out like how sensitive to make the game. Apparently, I think maybe the scale of the game was a little bit strange from the last one, because I had to use a much lighter sensitivity for this project, even though it, in theory, should have been about the same. But regardless, I got a number that ended up working out, and it's what I went with. Here, I just quickly set up the custom controls for the project. Very quick, simple process. I found a model online that I could use in order to get the intended player effect that I wanted. So I went ahead and imported it into Blender and decimated a few of its pieces and adjusted some of the bones in order to make the animations that I wanted to have work. So this is the sped up footage of me initially importing the model itself into Godot and setting it up to be attached to the player. And then this is after I had modified it quite a lot. You can see that the animations and the intended effect actually ended up working really, really well. Of course, I still had to set up the state machines for exactly how the character would stop and go to idle and go back to walking, but the effect looked really, really good, and I was really happy with it.
And while it isn't perfect, it is done. So next, I think we're going to work on the world, building out the level around the player character. I wanted to do multiple levels, but I'm not entirely sure that's going to be possible yet. We'll see how it goes over the next couple of days, but if it turns out to be possible, I'll try. Otherwise, this first level's got to be it.
So, getting back into it, I used TerraBrush and imported some textures in order to make a basic outline of a first area, and honestly, after loading in, it looked a lot better than I expected it to. So, great. This was a awesome first test run, and it meant I could keep working with TerraBrush. Next, I went ahead and added some shaders and some basic environmental effects along with some particles, and filled out the edges of the area with small walls to give kind of an illusion of depth. And so here was the first test after adding in kind of the environmental effects and these particles that I really, really wanted to get added in. And honestly, once it comes up here, you'll see, I think it's one of the prettiest tests I've run. It's definitely one of my favorite looking environments that I've ever created. I am just really excited to create more atmospheric stuff like this. And you can see here, I love the way that it looked here in this first test. And it'll change as time goes on. But this first test was really a good hallmark of how I wanted it to look. So, continuing on with this level design, I went ahead and popped into Blender to try and make a bathysphere, a kind of diving sphere. And I'm going to be entirely honest with you, I am not a 3D modeler by any stretch of the imagination. I barely know how to model anything. But I went ahead and made this in Blender. It's nothing special, but I think it got the job done. And at least when it's seen through the lens of the game's filters, I think it looks pretty good, actually. But I went ahead and sized it and kind of used it as a rudimentary spawn area. And here we get to see it in game for the first time, and I think it looked really well. I'm glad I didn't make it too glossy or too reflective, but I definitely need to get better at texturing.
I know I'm writing world done here, but we will be returning to it. Probably today as well, because what we're going to be doing next, we're working on level design, because there are a few branching paths within this game that we need to go ahead and sort out. I'm going to draw out a little kind of map of the game here.
Hey, FutureZ here. So this path of 3 branching path design that I wanted to do ended up being a lot more ambitious than I initially expected. So I ended up taking the first middle path and the third path, the one to the far right, and using them kind of together, mashing them together to make the game itself. And sadly, the left path design was lost in that translation. But yeah, just mentioning that here, so that's why the end result looks a bit different. Using another model I found on Sketchfab was pretty easy to make a in-theme kind of wall that I would later use as a kind of artificial blockade for the encounter with a creature, so that you couldn't kind of walk beyond the bounds and see too much before you were supposed to. I didn't mind it that much, though. The model was a scan, so it was very high poly for what we were doing here. I had to decimate it quite a lot to get the lower poly, lower quality feel out of it.
And with that done, we've finished little design. On to the air system.
I think one of the most important aspects about underwater games is the fact that you have to deal with losing oxygen. And so the next thing that I set up was the air system. And this was actually a pretty easy to implement thing, just needed some UI changes and the ability to lose air over a set duration of time rather than just calling it on delta. But overall, it made for a pretty smooth and easy to code system. Once I got it all working, I went ahead and tried it out. Here's the footage of that. You can see the oxygen goes down, pretty much correct timing the whole way through. And I was really happy with how it came out. It was surprisingly a lot easier than I expected, and for this just being the third day, having this much done was really promising to me.
With the air system done and the ability to drown now implemented, we're going to move on. Next, we're going to be working on the photo system.
Jumping right into the next test after having set up a model that I found along with some slight UI implemented into it, we were able to get a pretty basic camera system rolling. You'll see that I set up an animation for it for aiming through the lens, and also an animation for the flash. You can see a beginning animation for the giant before it was implemented further. There are some extra things that get added to that later, but that's a good representation of like this early photo system. Through some further tweaking, I was able to set up the system so that it will actually take screenshots and save them to your local storage, and also cleaned up the animation a bit, cleaned up the flash a little bit, and I eventually got it to a place where I was really happy with it. It also, now I have set up a model, which I'll show you here in a second, that is able to appear in front of the player character as kind of a means to keep the player character engaged and taking photos to keep them from being attacked by these creatures. And fun fact about these creatures as well, the photos you take of them do not appear in the screenshots folder. The photos appear, but not the actual creatures themselves, as a kind of slight nod to the fact that they're not very natural. So this is around the time that I realized that there was something missing from the game, which was a basic game loop of how to continuously progress throughout the game. And I found it in the form of having the player character take pictures of bodies in order to gain money, in order to then spend that money to recharge their camera and air. I ultimately went with this game loop because it was easy and fast, and obviously in a game jam that's probably the best thing to do. But overall, I'd say I'm like 50% satisfied with it. It feels fun to play, but also there was a real lack of a fear factor. So I decided to lean a bit heavier into the story to try and give a little bit of ominous feeling to everything.
Once that's done, we can start moving on to some of this stuff over here. Which this is the stuff I'm looking forward to.
So after more work, I hopped into Blender to go ahead and make the prologue scene. This is the first building I've ever modeled, and honestly, the first collection of things that I've ever modeled in such a way. It was a very new process to me, and something I was very uncomfortable doing, but I stuck to it, and I did make this a 3D model and a workable level within the game. I did not expect to do as good as I did, but with that being said, it's also not very good. I did what I could, but ultimately I am no 3D modeler by any stretch of the imagination, but maybe with some more practice and some more games under my belt, I'll find more comfort in it. The thing I found the hardest, without a doubt, was texturing. But yet, here it is. I, in fact, did manage to do it, something from the outset I didn't really think was possible, but hey, you know, not only can I make a game, but apparently I can make a 3D room as well. Not a very good looking one, but still a 3D room nonetheless. And yeah, I ended up being really happy with this, even though it looks kind of bad, all things considered. I'm gonna try my best to keep learning 3D modeling, because it seems to be a very necessary part of game development in general. And now what you're seeing is the final touches put onto the game. At this point, everything had been made and put together, and this was the last portion of the game to be structured and built around, which was the main menu. I went ahead and added in all of the different things that the main menu would need and kind of stylized it. And as I sit here re-watching the last of the kind of modeling for the game be done, it's still very surreal to me that I finished this project in the allotted time, and even technically 2 days early. I just am so elated that I was able to do it. It's really filled me with a newfound confidence, and you know, if you're also an aspiring game dev out there, I really encourage you to participate in a game jam, even if you think you'll fail, because if you do fail, you know, you're under time constraints, and it's not such a big deal. You only worked on it for, you know, a week or 2 weeks, and you can move on from that failure and try to learn. But if you succeed, it fills you with this sense of accomplishment that I don't think I've felt in very many other aspects of game development. Even when I released my first game, I felt like, you know, I didn't exactly do too much, but just knowing the exact amount of time that went into this, watching the creation of it from beginning to end is very interesting. It's very cool. But yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for watching up to this point, if you have, and if you want to consider donating to my Ko-Fi, that would be great. It's not necessary at all, but it would help the channel out a lot. And if you're interested in playing this game, it's free on itch. The link is in the description. The game I released before this one, link is also in the description. And yeah, I plan to release some more free games in the future. Maybe end up making a try at a title that is paid for, who knows. But thank you so much for watching, and I just want to say I hope you have a wonderful day.